This is a tutorial for using Dedicated User Environment, or DUE, which is a collection of scripts to configure Debian Linux-based build environments in Docker containers. This goes way beyond just the use of a Docker file to create a build environment, but comes with a launcher utility that supplies a bunch of defaults and makes developing in containers quite a bit easier, which I'm hoping will become apparent through the rest of the demonstration. To get started, let's go over to the Cumulus Networks GitHub page and download the code. So go to clone or download, copy the location, move over to my terminal window here where I've already installed Git, clone it, okay, we have the code. Let's take a look at what we just downloaded here. So if I cd into do, take a look at everything here. So we have a couple of things. There's the DUE program itself, and then the libraries it pulls in to run, and then a templates directory, which allows users to configure the individual build environments. So in order to use DUE, there are a few programs that you'll have to have pre-installed. So let's get those in. First one obviously is Git, which we just used to check out the code there. Then after that, you'll need an instance of Docker, which we can get from Debian, docker.io, not to be confused with Docker, which is a utility for toolbars. So that's a common mistake I usually make when I'm typing, is I forget to put the Docker, the IO after the Docker. We need BSD utils. Git's already there, and rsync. And we need to install this as root. All right, so that'll take a minute to download. So now that all that's downloaded and Docker is installed, I'm still not ready to run it because I'm not a member of the Docker group. So if I take a look at my groups, Docker is not in there, and if I try to run DUE without being a member of the group, I get this error about connecting to the daemon socket. Now, one of the things is that once I add myself, I have to log out and back in for the changes in group permissions to take effect. So let me add myself here. Add myself to the Docker group. I check my groups at the moment, still unchanged. However, if I take a look at the etc group file, there I am right at the end. So I'm going to reboot the system, and then we'll continue with the installation. All right, and we're back from the reboot, although if you're in a multi-user system, you can just log out and back in again to get the group's permissions to take effect. So if I take a look at my groups now, I am a member of Docker. So before we get on to installing things, a quick word about terminology. In using Docker, the terms image and container sometimes get used interchangeably. Image is the contents of the configuration of what the container will be on disk. Think of it as it's basically a file structure that gets read. And a container is a running instance of an image. So you can have multiple containers running off the same image, and what we'll be creating here is a Docker image to build ONIE, the Open Network Install Environment, although there are a few other options for that as well. So we take a look at what we've downloaded here. Within the DUE directory, there's a directory called templates. So we cd templates. So each one of these is a target that can be created by DUE to create a build environment. There's a build environment for Debian packaging or for free-range routing, and the one we'll be concentrating on, again in this video, is the Open Network Install Environment, or ONIE. Now, when DUE creates a Docker image, it is a combination of the contents of the common templates directory, then whatever specific role-based directory the container is being created for, and all of this is put on top of a base image container downloaded from Docker Hub. So that would be like a Debian 8 build container or an Ubuntu 18 container, see, even I'm doing it, operating system image. And then the resulting image will give you a, say, Ubuntu 18 based build environment for ONIE. Now, if we take a look in some of the directories here, common templates, this gets added to every image that we make. So if we do tree common templates, there's a couple of files here. The Docker file templates and config stores information used by Docker. It basically serves as a skeleton file that gets modified based on the role it will be playing when it finally gets built. Anything under file system, these are files that are copied directly into the container to replace existing files or add in there. So there's a template there that's a login message that will identify what the role of the container is. It can get very confusing if you've got multiple of these running around, and sometimes you forget what your context is. And it also comes with a bash RC add-on that will change the prompt to be something to remind you that, oh, I'm in an ONIE build container and not in my own host system. It can get confusing because do will automatically mount the user's build directory, which defaults to the home directory, which is very convenient for development, but can also be a little confusing as to what your context is. So that's a little something in there to help out. Under user local bin, we have two scripts. Container create user is really the big value add for do here. When it's invoked, it creates a user account within the container that matches the user account of the user who invoked do. So it will have the same username, user ID, groups, and given that it's mounting your home directory, this becomes incredibly convenient because not only do you have access to all the configuration files you would normally have when you're doing development, any files created in the container get saved as you owning them. So there's no weird permissions problems when you exit the container. Everything you create there is owned by you, unless of course you're creating root-owned files that you're saving, and that becomes its own problem. The do build script will vary based on the role of the container. The ONIE one is kind of still in progress. The one for Debian packaging is a little bit more developed, and then it does some clever stuff about resolving dependencies and things like that. But it's basically a API for the do launcher application to call into to get the container to just build things and reduce typing and options for errors. The install config common library template is just a bunch of script utilities that get used by container create user. The pre-install config template gets run before anything in the Docker file gets run, which can be handy if you're installing a mix of standard Debian and then custom repositories files. And then the post-install config template gets run after the Docker file. So having described all of that, let's take a look at what a role-specific template has. So if we tree ONIE, we see where it's overriding some of the defaults here. It's got its own Docker file configuration. It pulls in a couple of packages from stretch backports. The default ONIE container is based off of Debian 9 stretch. So there's a configuration to pull some of that in, which is not supplied by the image that you would download directly off of Docker Hub. The template has a little note in it for the do bash RC has a note in it to indicate that you are in an ONIE build container. There's a local copy of do build, which is still, as I said, kind of in progress. And the post-install config template does a whole lot of configuration with pulling in the packages from stretch backports, pulling in some stuff from another open source project that is not part of Debian, and basically just handles a number of things that are inconvenient to set up. This is another one of the strong points of do, in that if you have a complicated build environment, something that's not terribly standard, you can set it all up within the post-install configuration and then just have it built. You're figuring, as the author of the software, you know what the build environment's supposed to be like, and the end user doesn't have to figure it out. All they have to do is run the container, and then they've got everything set up. It reduces steps, errors, and hassle. Now, actually invoking this, there are a number of command line arguments that can be supplied. You can set the prompt on the fly. You can determine what the base container downloaded, base image downloaded from Docker Hub will be. And it's kind of a lot to remember. So you'll notice the README file, every template comes with a README file. Within that, there are some sample configurations to be actually able to create the template. And being lazy, I had to just parse all of these so you can know exactly what it'll build. So if I try to do the creation of a container, do create help, and I get into the right directory. Then I get all of this, which, let me shrink the font down a little bit here to get all of this on one line. Wow, that's mostly unreadable. All right. I will take the ONIE creation line here. This will be a little bit easier to read. So ONIE is a target. I'm going to build it. I want the Debian 9 version of this right there. So let's pick this apart. Make that a little more readable here. So what it's doing, so it's telling you to create an image, that's the name of the Docker image to pull down from Docker Hub. Comes with a description. Gonna name it ONIE build, make sure the prompt says ONIE, and then use the ONIE template directory. And I don't need that plus there. So, it's off and running, so it's merged all the files, template files into a directory, created a Docker file, downloaded the Debian 9 Docker image from Docker Hub. Now it's running all the configuration scripts to actually create this. Whole bunch of stuff to install here, so we may skip ahead in the video. Okay, and we're done. That probably took a little bit longer than it could have because I installed a bunch of additional things in there that are used for publishing ONIE. The average build user wouldn't need it, but I want to make sure that the containers I'm using for ONIE release builds are the same as everybody else is building on for consistency and debugging purposes. So if we take a look at what we've added to the system here, we should now have two images on the system. So the first one is the Debian 9 build image that got pulled down, and then the ONIE build image is on top of that. You can see there's a little bit of a size discrepancy there from all the stuff that the ONIE configuration put onto the base Debian image. So at this point, we're ready to run it. Now, since there's only one do-based image on the system, when I run it, it's just going to kick me right in there. Okay, now let's take a look at what just happened there. So if I scroll back a little bit here, okay, not that much. Okay, so I've run it. So the do configuration file, system-wide, it's looking for is not there because this was not built and installed as a Debian package. Do is not currently in Debian, but I'm hoping to get it there soon. So it's using all of its defaults. So what it's done basically is wrapped this Docker command. By typing do run, I got all of this stuff. And what it's basically doing, setting up a container to be interactive, act like a terminal. When done, remove the container, mount my home directory, name the running container, give it a host name. That's the image to run right there. That matches the image ID. When you run it, run the container create user script, which I had mentioned previously. Add myself there with my user ID, group ID, and I'm also a member of the Alex group. Also, it defaults mounts to, there's it telling me that is defaulted to mounting my home directory. And because do can work on multi-user systems, you can arbitrarily set a limit of containers individual users can run. I found that was kind of handy as people were leaving containers running and forgetting about them. So it's just a reminder that if you've got resources going on a multi-user system to be aware of that. Okay, so telling me all of this. Now this content here from here on down is running within the container. So that's the creation of my user account within the container, automatically add me to the sudoers file, puts the do bash rc in there, standard login, And there's the prompt reminding me that I am indeed in a ONIE build container. Now the next steps from here will be to actually check out ONIE and build it. So the first step in building ONIE is getting a hold of the code, which I have gone to the GitHub page at Open Compute Project ONIE. Copy the URL here. And over here I've got a terminal running tmux, so it's two separate terminal windows split. So in my home directory, I will check out the ONIE code with a git clone URL. Take a second while that checks out. So there's the ONIE code. Now if I go and start a do container, run it in that order, sets me up. Now, since it's mounted my home directory, the contents are identical, and if I touch something in the container, it exists in my home directory and it's owned by me. So having proved that out, let's build ONIE. So cd build config, and we'll go with the KVM target since that's fairly straightforward. So make machine equals KVM underscore x86 underscore 64 all. Now it's got to download a bunch of build tools and it will crunch through all of this. So I am going to edit this here and we'll magically jump to the end of the video. Okay, and after a while we can see here that the build is finally completed. On the bottom panel we have the container build that has the build log output, and in the top is my home directory which has the build output in it, and it's as easy as that. So thanks for watching. If there are any questions, I'll try and follow up with them in the comments below. Thank you.